بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We continue today with the topic of al-Iman, the topic of faith. In the previous lesson, we established that Iman with Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah comprises of 5 things, and those 5 things are the belief of the heart, the speech of the tongue, the action of the limbs, and that it increases and that it decreases. These are the 5 principles of Ahlul Sunnah in the topic of Iman, and we looked at some of the evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah for this understanding from in the previous lesson. And we said that Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala, that he fell short and he didn't incorporate actions into Iman. So today we're going to continue our discussion, and the first point that we are raising is that since Iman comprises of these 5 things that we mentioned, belief in the heart, speech on the tongue, the action of the limbs, and it increases or decreases, then when we look at all of the people of the Qibla who turn towards the Qibla and look at how have they understood Iman in light of these 5 things, we can broadly say that there are numerous sayings. There are 5 sayings that we can identify when we look at all of the Muslim groups and see how they have differed on how to define and characterize this Iman which is mentioned in the texts. So the first statement, so this is the first of 5 positions of views. The first position is that Iman is only tasdeeq. Tasdeeq, which means just the belief in the heart. And that, for example, you believe that the Messenger ﷺ is truthful, you believe the Quran is true, you believe paradise is true, you believe hellfire is true, you believe in the angels. So you make tasdeeq. Right? You believe in the truthfulness of these things of which we have been informed. Right? So you make tasdeeq of the Messenger of Allah, you make tasdeeq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the saying of the Ash'aris. This is the saying of the Ash'aris, and it is also the saying of the Maturidis, Hanafi Maturidis in general. And the reason why they say this is that they saw in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, at the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd surah, verse 285, Allah says, آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله. All of them believe in Allah and the angels and His angels and His books and His messengers. So when they saw these verses in the Quran and they see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning belief in things which are not seen, we can't see these things, they are matters of the unseen, and this means that they understood this Iman to be in relation to things that we cannot see, and that this requires a person's heart to affirm the truthfulness of these things. So therefore, in light of these evidences in the Quran, they considered Iman just to be that belief in the heart in relation to these things that we cannot see. So this is the first group of the Murji'ah, tasdeeq only, and there is another more extreme position, and this is the position of the Jahmiyyah. And they are extremists. They are the ones who said that it is mere knowledge in the heart, which is Iman. Mere knowledge. Ma'rifah. Ma'rifah. It is just mere knowledge in the heart that comprises Iman. So these people, this view is found amongst some of the extremist Sufis. If you look at some of the very extreme Sufis in the past, like Ibn Arabi and others, they claimed that Fir'aun was a believer. Why was Fir'aun a believer? They claimed because they said that Fir'aun, he just simply had knowledge. He knew that Allah existed inwardly. He knew that. And so on this basis, they affirmed the Iman of Fir'aun. And this is false, this is batil. But this is the extremist view amongst the Jahmiyyah. So that together, we can treat them for now the same saying. One group says tasdeeq, and the other group says ma'rifah, which is knowledge. The second view are those who said Iman is only something on the tongue. Iman is comprised only in the expression of the tongue. Now this group is known as the Karramiyyah. They appeared in the 3rd century after Hijrah, after the time of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala, and they are ascribed to a man called Muhammad bin Karram, and they said that Iman is just the affirmation on the tongue. Now why did they say this? The reason why they said this was because when they saw in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is addressing the people of Iman. So when He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, when He's issuing commands and things like this, they say that this is something that applies to the people of hypocrisy as well. That even the munafiqun, the hypocrites who are amongst the Muslimin, they are included within these addresses, this speech that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is directing towards the believers as a whole. And the hypocrites outwardly, from what we see, they are from the generality of the Muslims, and they too are required to respond to these addresses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because the hypocrites, they affirmed with their tongues, outwardly they affirmed with their tongues, even though they didn't believe in their hearts, they have entered into Iman because they come under these commands and these affairs with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the people of Islam in general. So therefore they said that Iman therefore can only be what is a speech on the tongue. Now this is obviously incorrect, because it means that the hypocrites in the life of this world are treated to be believers in reality when they are not. They are disbelievers in reality. Anyway, that's the second saying. The third saying is the saying of what we call the Murji'atul Fuqaha. They are the Hanafi jurists. And they said Iman is just speech on the tongue and affirmation in the heart, belief in the heart. This is the saying of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, and this statement of Abu Hanifa was taken by him from his teachers from Kufa in Iraq, like Hamad bin Abi Sulaiman, and this is a mistake. And what they said was that Iman is just the tasdeeq in the heart. It is something that is the tasdeeq, meaning the assent or the belief in the heart only. And they said that the actions of the heart and the belief of the heart are one and the same thing. Right? So understand this. So we will explain this a bit later inshallah ta'ala, but basically, for now, very briefly, when we look at the heart, we see that the heart does numerous things. The heart makes tasdeeq, right? It believes in things. This is what we call tasdeeq. But in addition to that, the heart also has actions. It loves, it fears, it hopes, it has tawakkul, right? So what they did the Murji'atul Fuqaha, is that they treated everything in the heart to be a single thing, just one thing. It is everything is just a tasdeeq. All of it is one single thing. So they brought all of that together and they said that this is Iman in the heart, and then outwardly it is expression on the tongue. Now the difference, what is the difference now? Because remember earlier on we said that the first group say that the Ash'aris and some of the Maturidis, they say that Iman is just a belief in the heart. Right? Here the Murji'atul Fuqaha, they are saying Iman is belief in the heart and the expression on the tongue. Now the difference between the two is that this group, the Murji'atul Fuqaha, they say, even though they don't include actions in Iman, but they say a person must bring actions. Right? So understand this point. Even though they say that Iman is not from the actions are not from the reality of Iman, a person still has to bring actions. He has to do the wajibat. He has to keep away from those things which are prohibited. And if a person leaves action, he is considered to be a sinner. He is considered to be a fasiq. And so a clear difference between this group and the first group that we mentioned is that the first group, like the Ash'aris and some of the Maturidis, and even the Karramiyah who say Iman is just on the tongue, they essentially say that if a person didn't do any actions, he will be saved. If he didn't do any actions at all, he will be saved. Whereas what the Murji'atul Fuqaha, this third group, what they are saying is, they say that Iman is just speech and belief in the heart. And actions are not from Iman. Actions are not from Iman. However, a person still has to bring actions. He has to act. Otherwise he is sinful. Right? So you can see there's a clear difference between these two statements. So this is the third saying. The fourth saying is the saying of the Khawarij and the Mu'tazila. The Khawarij and the Mu'tazila. Now these groups, their statement outwardly appears to be the same as Ahlul Sunnah. They said Iman is belief in the heart, and it is affirmation with the tongue, statement of the tongue, and it is the action of the limbs. It is the action of the limbs. However, when they speak of action, when they mention action, what they do is that they treat all of action to be a single thing. They treat all of action to be a single thing. So for example, if there is a single command, like for example, being righteous to the parents, if there's a single obligation, they will treat that obligation as if it is all of action. All of action. And if there's a single prohibition, like something which is made haram, then they will treat that thing to be as if it is all of action. Right? So in other words, action, all of it is like a single thing. And if a person leaves something which is wajib, or if he falls into a single thing which is haram, then they say this person has become a disbeliever. Why? Because all of his action has been invalidated just by that one thing. So it's as if they treat actions to be one single block. One single block. If you imagine, if we have just a single rock, one single rock, all of it. Either you have all of it or you have none of it. Right? Either you have all of it or you have none of it. And because they see each individual obligation or each individual prohibition, the matter which is haram, to be a pillar in Iman, to be like as if it is the whole of action, then it means if a believer committed a major sin, he would lose all of his action, therefore he would lose all of his Iman, so therefore he is a disbeliever. However, this is so once the Khawarij and the Mu'tazila they hold this opinion, then they have a slight difference with each other. So the Khawarij said that this person is called a kafir in the life of this world. So a person who commits a major sin, all of his action has gone, all of his iman is gone, he is described as a kafir in the life of this world. And obviously he's a kafir in the hereafter according to them. And as for the Mu'tazila, they said that a person who commits a major sin, we won't say he's a kafir or a believer in the life of this world. We'll simply say that he is in a position between two positions. He is in a manzila bayna manzilatayn. He's in a position between two positions. No, in this life, yeah. This is in the life of this world. They both agreed that in the hereafter that person is a kafir who will enter the hellfire. Right? But in the life of this world, they say that the Khawarij say that he is a kafir. They describe him as a kafir, and the Mu'tazila say that he is in a position between two positions, neither a believer nor a disbeliever. In this life, yeah. Because remember, when we look at the rulings in people, we speak of them in terms of this life and the hereafter. Right? So in the life of this world, we might apply labels, but only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the realities. Right? So for example, the hypocrites, how do we label them? We label them as Muslimin. Is that right? We treat them as believers. But in the reality of the affair, the true and real hukm that Allah knows is that they are kuffar. Right? But we apply labels based upon what we see apparently. Right? So that's why this is a topic called al-asma wal-ahkam. Al-asma wal-ahkam. It's called labels and rulings. Right? So for the hypocrite, the label is that he is a Muslim. We outwardly see that he apparently to us is a Muslim and a believer. That's the ism, that's the label that's given to him. But the hukm, the actual true and real ruling upon him is that he's a kafir. He's a disbeliever. Right? So we can speak of the labels and the names, labels and the rulings in the life of this world and the hereafter. Right? So when we speak here of the Khawarij and the Mu'tazila, the Khawarij say that the label and the ruling in this life upon a person who commits a major sin is that he's a kafir. Kafir in name, kafir in ruling. Right? This is what the Khawarij are saying. Unlike the Mu'tazila, what they're saying is that a person who falls into a major sin, then in this life we describe him only in one position between two positions. Right? In a manzila bayna manzilatayn. And in the hereafter, if he dies upon that, he dies as a disbeliever. And in the hereafter, they agree that he's a disbeliever. So, obviously, this is a mistake, just like it's a mistake to say that the hypocrites are believers in terms of the ruling in this life. That's what the Karramiyya say. This is wrong. Even though they agree that in the hereafter, they're disbelievers. Likewise, when the Khawarij say that in this life, the sinners are disbelievers in terms of the ruling, again that's a mistake, and even in the name as well, that's a mistake. Right? So this is the fourth saying. This is the saying of the Mu'tazila and the Khawarij. And the fifth and final saying is the saying of Ahlul Hadith wal Athar. It is a saying of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, which is Iman is belief, al-i'tiqad. Now, when we say i'tiqad doesn't actually mean just belief. Remember, the i'tiqad of the heart is anything that the heart attaches and binds to and holds on to, and that can include matters of belief and matters of action as well. Right? So we would say that tasdeeq is from i'tiqad. Right? Remember we said before that the heart, it does many things. It has tasdeeq, it believes things, it also loves things, it also fears things, it also hopes, it also has tawakkul, it has all these different things. All these things together, it is from i'tiqad. Right? So i'tiqad normally is translated as belief, although that's not strictly correct. Tasdeeq is the belief in the heart. But the heart does other things, and collectively all of that together is called i'tiqad. That's why when you look at this definition, if you look at the wordings of the definition of Iman very carefully, you'll see that sometimes they say i'tiqadun bil qalb. I'tiqadun bil qalb. Now this statement here actually means two things. It means tasdeeq and amal. It means belief and action of the heart together, right? Then they say wa qawlun bil lisan, an action and the statement of the tongue. And then they say wa amalun bil arkan, acting by the limbs. So this definition here actually comprises four things. It comprises the belief in the heart and the actions of the heart, because that's what i'tiqad means. I'tiqadun bil qalb. And then you have the speech of the tongue, and then you have the speech of the action of the limbs. So this is the position of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And then they say that it increases and it decreases. And when they say action, that there must be action, outward action, action of the limbs, then they mean that the person must bring at least something from the actions of obedience for his iman to be correct. He must bring some outward action of obedience. Now, the scholars differ. What is that action of obedience? Is it the prayer? Is it something else? Is it just any minor action? The scholars differ with respect to this. But in general, when we say that Ahlul Sunnah say there must be belief, speech and action, the action means that there must be at least something from the outward actions, whether that is the salah or whether it is something else. Now the difference between Ahlul Sunnah and the Khawarij and the Mu'tazila, as we said, is that Ahlul Sunnah, they treat the outward actions to be as if they are pebbles of different sizes. Pebbles of different sizes. Remember we said that the Mu'tazila and the Khawarij, they consider action, outward action, to be like one single rock. Either it's there or it's not there. Whereas Ahlul Sunnah, they say that the action that they speak of, which is from Iman, is something that divides and is of varying levels. So therefore we can, sticking to the analogy, we can say that the outward actions are like different size rocks or different size pebbles. Some of them are larger, heavier, some of them are smaller. So for example, we would say that the salah is very large in size as a pebble or as a small rock. And then we have something, relatively small in size, like removing something harmful from the floor, right? So Iman to them is something that is divisible. It is something which has parts, but all of these parts are from Iman. They are from the reality of Iman, but it is something divisible. And therefore, if a person leaves an obligation, his Iman has decreased. If he brings an obligation, his Iman has increased. Right? However, his Iman doesn't cease to exist if he doesn't bring an obligation. Why? Because there is other affairs which remain behind. If one rock is dropped, then there are other rocks which are still present. So this is how it is with the people of the Sunnah, that they believe Iman is belief, speech and action is something divisible in their view. Okay, now this brings us to an important second issue, which is that we want to focus upon the view of Ahlul Sunnah and the view of the Murji'atul Fuqaha. Now, can anyone remember what was the view of the Murji'atul Fuqaha? They are the Hanafi jurists. We said that it is belief and speech, but on top of that, what do they say?
Person must bring action.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Person must bring action. Although they don't include it to be from within Iman. Right? Now, an example to illustrate the difference, if we imagine we have one bucket here, and this is the bucket of the Murji'atul Fuqaha. So in there they will throw belief, in there they will throw speech, but the pebbles are going to be outside. Right? The pebbles are outside the bucket. Okay? The pebbles are not in the bucket, they're outside the bucket. So the pebbles are not from the bucket of Iman. So what they are saying is that although we don't say actions are from Iman, you have to still bring them. So when you carry the bucket, you've got to bring the pebbles with it as well, right? Otherwise, you are subject to punishment. That's what they're saying. Now, Ahlul Sunnah they say that the bucket is here, in goes the belief in the heart, in goes the statement of the tongue, and in go all the pebbles into the bucket as well. Because the pebbles actually from the bucket of Iman, they cannot be ever considered outside of them. Right? So, now if you think of that analogy, a question arises, which is, what's the difference between these two statements? What's the real and true difference? And is the difference between these two, is it a real and true difference? Meaning, is it just a matter of wording? Is it just, are they really saying the same thing, but the wording is different? Because remember, the Murji'atul Fuqaha, they are saying that a person will be punished for leaving actions. And they say actions are necessary. Right? Which is what Ahlul Sunnah say as well. That a person who leaves actions will be punished, a person who brings them will be rewarded, whatever, yeah? So the question here now is, what's the real nature of the difference? Is it a true and real difference? Is it a difference in substance? Or is it just they're saying the same thing, but the wording is they're just saying it in different wordings? Right? That's the issue we're going to look at now. That's the issue that we're going to look at now. Because that is something that the scholars have discussed in the past, like Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and likewise Ibn Abil Izz al-Hanafi, who is the explainer of the Aqeedah of Tahawi, and likewise many of the scholars today. They've discussed this issue. And they have a difference. Some of them say, well, actually, the difference is just one wording only. They're really saying the same thing, but they're expressing it in different words. And others say, no, rather the difference is a true and real difference. It's the difference in substance, in body. So that issue we're going to look at now, inshallah ta'ala. And so the Shaykh, when he looks at this issue, he says that, obviously he says that the scholars have differed. He mentioned that the scholars have genuinely differed about whether this is a difference in wording or difference in reality. And he says this really comes down to how you look at the situation. Right? So it depends on how you look at the situation. So some of the scholars, they look at the situation from the angle of takfir. Right? In other words, what is the consequence of these definitions of Iman, or these understandings of Iman, upon making takfir of an individual? Right? So you can look at the issue from this angle, right? So in other words, we look at the Hanafi, the Murji'atul Fuqaha, we look at their view, and we look at its consequence on takfir, on expelling a Muslim from Islam. Then we look at the view of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and we see what is its consequence on expelling someone from the fold of Islam, right? So we're looking here purely from the angle of takfir, right? Now, is there a difference in the consequence between the saying of the Murji'atul Fuqaha and the saying of Ahlul Sunnah? Right? Because that will tell us, is there really a true difference in their views or not? Right? This is one way of looking at the situation. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. And the second way of looking at the situation is looking at what is the effect that the position of the Murji'atul Fuqaha has on a person's belief regarding Iman. And what is the effect of the position of Ahlul Sunnah on belief regarding Iman. Right? Now this will be made inshallah clear as we go on through the explanation. But just to make it clear now, that if we wish to understand why the scholars have differed about the difference between the Murji'atul Fuqaha and Ahlul Sunnah, then it comes down to which angle and perspective are they looking from, right? And they can be looking from these two angles, either from the angle of takfir, or they could be looking from the angle of what effect do these views have on how a person, how a person views Iman itself and the relationship of actions in Iman. Now, let's elaborate upon this in a bit more detail. So if we look at from the angle of takfir, right? What is the consequence on the issue of takfir? When we look at it from the angle of takfir, we come to realize that really the difference between the murji'atul fuqaha and Ahlul Sunnah is a difference is only in wording only. Right? It's not a real and true difference. Why is this? This is because the Hanafis who say Iman is only speech of the tongue and belief in the heart, they are agreed, the Hanafis are agreed with all of Ahlul Sunnah, with Imam al-Shafi'i, Ahmad Malik and the others, that kufr, disbelief, is something that occurs by belief, speech, action and doubt. Right? Al-qawl, wal-amal, wal-i'tiqad, wal-shak. The Hanafis agree on all of this, that a person can become a disbeliever by way of a belief he holds, or a statement that he makes, or an action that he performs, or by falling into doubt, shak. They're agreed upon all of this. And they are agreed that if a person makes a statement, then, he can become a disbeliever. And a person who holds a belief, he can make him a disbeliever. And a person who does an action which invalidates Iman, he can become a disbeliever. And when he falls into something of doubt, he can become a disbeliever. In fact, when we look at the Hanafis, the Hanafi Murji'ah in general, you see that they are even more severe in the issues of takfir than even some of the other, like madhahib, like the Hanabila and the Shafi'iyah. For example, if someone, the issues in takfir are quite severe. When we go back to their books and we look at examples that they give of how a person becomes a disbeliever, we find that they are very, very severe examples. Like they say, if someone said, this is just like a small surah, this is just a small chapter, meaning of the Quran, they would make takfir of a person based upon that, just by saying that this is a small surah. Or if someone said, describing a mosque, and instead of saying masjid, he said musajid. Musajid is just a form in Arabic. It's a form of a noun in Arabic, which we call the diminutive form. It means to describe a smaller version of something else. Right? Kitab, kutayib. Right? Kitab, a book. Kutayib, like a small pamphlet or a small booklet or a small whatever. Yeah. So masjid, musajid. So they said that someone who uses this word to describe a masjid, he becomes a kafir by way of that. Or if someone takes a book in which there are Quranic verses and he throws it, he becomes a disbeliever by way of that, right? So the point that we're making here is that the Hanafis on the issues of takfir, when you look into their books, the books of fiqh, and you look in those chapters that do with how does a person become an apostate, you'll see that they have many, many, many examples which are very severe examples of how a person can become a disbeliever. So when we look at it from this angle, then it's clear to us that the Hanafis, unlike the other extreme Murji'ah, like the Ash'aris and the Jahmiyyah, right, they actually make takfir of people by way of actions that they fall into, right? So this is the same as Ahlul Sunnah. Ahlul Sunnah, they make takfir by way of amal, by way of action. So when we look at it from the angle of takfir, right, as in the consequence as it relates to takfir, we see really here there's no difference between what the Hanafis are saying and what the Hanafi Murji'ah are saying and what Ahlul Sunnah are saying. So from this angle, if we look at it from this angle, and likewise also leaving takfir aside, the Hanafi Murji'ah agree that a person is punishable, right? If a person commits a major sin, they agree that he will be punished, right? Just like Ahlul Sunnah say a person who leaves a major sin, he will be punished, right? So when we look at it from these angles, from the bab of takfir, and from the angle of, tafsiq as well, and from the angle of punishment, it appears that everything is the same, right? This is why some of the scholars, when they looked at it from this angle, they said the position of the Murji'atul Fuqaha and the position of Ahlul Sunnah, they say it is a difference in wording only. And this is a view of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. It is also the view of Ibn Abil Izz al-Hanafi, the explainer of at-Tahaawiyyah, because they looked at it from this particular angle. Now the second way to look at it, the second way of looking at the issue, is from the angle of is looking at it from the angle of what effect does it have upon a person's understanding of Iman itself. Right? What effect does it have upon a person's understanding of Iman itself? And this becomes more clear to us. In fact, this is made very clear if we go back to our example that we gave in the previous lesson, when we discussed the linguistic meaning of Iman, and we talked about Iman and al-aman, and we talked about tasdeeq, and we said that the linguistic definition itself in the language is something that implies a number of things. And the example that we gave was that if a person came into this room and said to one of the brothers present that, "Akhi, your car is being stolen. Your car is being stolen." Right? So, if he just said, "Jazakallahu khairan," and just sat there, right? Because that's what he believes Iman is, right? Then, from this angle, we can now see that the difference between Ahlul Sunnah and between the Murji'atul Fuqaha is a true and real difference. Why? Because it now affects how you view what the implications of this belief is. Right? What the implication of this belief is. So if one person says that it's required just for me just to believe in what he said. Right? So imagine, your car is being stolen and someone said, your car is being stolen. You said, "Jazakallah khair for letting me know, I believe you." And you just sit there and you do nothing. Right? This is because there are a number of things Number one, that when it comes to actions, number one, that you affirm the action, and number one, that you actually implement the action. Right? So if you just sit there, knowing that you have to act and go out and protect your car, but you just sit there, so you make iqrar, you affirm that you have to go out and protect your car and get your car back. Right? This is only one half of it. The second thing is you have to actually go and do it. You have to go and do it. You have to get up and go and do it. Right. So this now helps us to explain that the difference between the two views is a true and real difference. Why? Because it now affects the issue of the reality of what is required from us. Right? If you believe that actions are not from Iman, they don't enter into the bucket of Iman, right, then it really shows that we are separating actions from belief. We are separating actions from belief. And so this is from this angle, it shows that the difference is a true and real difference. Right? Because it's to do with what does it make us, what does it lead us to believe? What does it lead us to believe about actions? And Ahlul Sunnah say that actions can never ever be separated from belief. Actions can never ever be separated from belief, by way of this example that we've just given. Right? Whereas what the Murji'atul Fuqaha, they say, well, actions, although they are required, we say they're required, they can be separated from belief. Because they are not part and parcel of belief. So here we're looking not from the angle of takfir, but from the angle of how is he affected in his belief? How is he affected in his belief? That if he looks at the view of the Murji'atul Fuqaha, looks at the view of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, how does he, how is he affected by that belief? How do these views, how does it affect what a person believes about Iman? So, this shows that from this angle, the difference is true and real. And this is also because if we try to imagine another situation where we have an individual, it's very hard to try and think of a man who believes in his heart, but he's never ever done a single good deed. Right? It's just not possible for a person to think of that situation ever being possible. It's not possible. Because if a person has Iman inside of his heart, then it must manifest itself outwardly upon the limbs. Right? From the example that we gave, because of the connection between tasdeeq and amal, and a person becomes safe by way of the ayah. So to think of belief and speech devoid of actions, and actions being separate and outside of the bucket, it's something that a person, you can't really conceive of that. It's just not possible. Right? Because it's not possible to think of a man who believes and then he spends the whole of his life never having once ever acted a single good deed outwardly. That scenario is just simply not possible. Right? So from this angle, when we look at how is a person made to think and believe about the topic of Iman and the topic of actions and their position in relation to Iman, then here the difference has to be clearly, it has to be a difference in substance and in body. And that's why Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, they say that the difference that the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah, like present in our time, like if you look at the statements of Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala and Shaykh Ibn Baz and Shaykh Saalih al-Fawzaan and all of the ulama today, they say that the difference between Ahlul Sunnah and the Murji'atul Fuqaha is something that is true and real, because they expel actions from the reality of Iman. And also because we see that in the Quran and the Sunnah, we see the Quran and Sunnah, it commands with certain actions. It tells you to do certain things. It commands you. And it commands you with belief. It commands you with actions. So when a person looks at the texts, he can clearly see that I'm being commanded with action. Right? And the texts clearly indicate that actions are from Iman. So from this angle, this is different to what the Murji'atul Fuqaha say, because they would say, well, even though you're being commanded in the Quran, do such and such and do such and such, actions are not actually from Iman. It opposes to that which is clearly apparent from the Quran, that we're being commanded with something that is from Iman. So anyway, is all of that clear? The second issue, anybody not clear about that? Yeah, in terms of how it affects our belief and understanding of Iman itself and the position of actions in relation to Iman. Okay, the third thing that we will finish with is the issue of, in fact we can finish with two more points. We can finish the whole discussion in fact, inshallah. So the third point is regarding increasing and decreasing. Now regarding increase and decrease, there are a number of views. The saying of the majority of the people of knowledge from Ahlul Sunnah, and even some of the Murji'ah, they say that Iman increases and decreases. Iman increases and decreases. This is the first view. Iman both increases and decreases. The second view is that Iman increases but does not decrease. Iman increases but does not decrease. Now this view is ascribed to some of the Imams of the Sunnah, and they said that because we see clearly in the Quran evidence that Iman can increase, yet we do not see any explicit evidence, any clear explicit evidence that Iman can decrease. Therefore they held that Iman can only increase but not decrease. This is the second view. And the third view is that Iman does not increase nor does it decrease. And this is the saying of groups of the Murji'ah, as we said, and others. Now, a point that needs to be made here is that there are some of the Murji'ah who say that Iman can increase and decrease, but we have to understand what they mean by this. Right? They mean it, if we go back to our example of the bucket, right? So if we imagine our bucket in the view of the Murji'atul Fuqaha, we have our bucket. In the bucket is tasdeeq, right? In the bucket is the qawl, the saying. And outside is the pebbles. So what they are saying, when they say that Iman can increase, what they are saying is really, because there are some from the Maturidis and Ash'aris who actually say that Iman can increase. They actually do say this. but they mean it upon their understanding of Iman. The actions are outside of Iman. It just simply means that a person, he's bringing more pebbles, right? He's carrying more pebbles with him, even though they are not within the bucket. So metaphorically speaking, like in terms of metaphorically, majazan, that his Iman is increased, has increased. Why? Because it's producing more fruits. It's producing more fruits. Fruits are the pebbles. But the fruits are not actually in the bucket itself. The pebbles are not actually in the bucket itself. So metaphorically, we can accept and say, of course, a person, when he prays and fasts and so on and so forth, that his Iman is increasing and decreasing. And there are others from the Murji'ah who say, no, Iman does not increase or decrease. So the point that the Shaykh is going to make here is that just because a person says Iman increases and decreases, does not mean that he is not from the Murji'ah. Do you understand that point? You get that point now, yeah? That just because someone might say and express verbally, yes, I believe Iman increases and decreases. This statement here is from one angle, it's independent of the first three things that we said. Belief in the heart, speech of the tongue, action of the limbs. Do you understand? Because some of the Murji'ah from the Ash'aris and Maturidis actually do say that Iman increases and decreases. Right? But they mean it in their particular way. So the point that we're making here is that someone might say Iman increases and decreases, yet he's from the Murji'ah. Someone might say Iman does not increase and does not decrease, yet he is also from the Murji'ah. So this saying on its own and by itself, independently, doesn't always tell us that someone is from the Murji'ah or not. Therefore, we have to go back to the three things that we said. Iman is qawlun wa amalun wa i'tiqadun, as we said earlier on. So, anyway, this is the third point that the Shaykh mentions. And the fourth point that we want to mention and finish with is that Imam al-Tahawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his definition, if you remember when we go back to the text of al-Tahawi, he said, إِقْرَارٌ بِاللِّسَانِ وَتَصْدِيقٌ بِالْجَنَانِ. He used the word tasdeeq, right? So now this comes back to the point that we made earlier on, which is that we would say, Ahlul Sunnah say, i'tiqadun bil-janan, or i'tiqadun bil-qalb, belief in the heart. Whereas here, At-Tahawi said, tasdeequn bil-janan, belief in the heart. Now, what is the difference? This comes back down to what's the difference between i'tiqad and tasdeeq. I'tiqad and tasdeeq. We already have raised this issue previously in the lesson. We mentioned it briefly earlier in the lesson. So here, what's the difference between the two? Well, tasdeeq is just a single thing. It's just one thing. It just means to believe that someone is speaking the truth with what he's informing you. Right? So you make tasdeeq of the Messenger of Allah in whatever he tells you about Allah, His books, His angels. This is tasdeeq. Tasdeeq is just a single thing. It's one thing. Whereas i'tiqad, when we speak of i'tiqad is something that comprises many of the actions of the heart. And it includes tasdeeq. So i'tiqad is a more general term, and it refers to whatever is taking place in the heart. Right? So you understand the clear difference between tasdeeq and i'tiqad. And so therefore, we say that when we say i'tiqadun bil qalb or i'tiqadun bil janan, we say that it means it's tasdeeq, it means it's belief, it means it's ikhlas, it's sincerity, it means it's love, it's fear, it's hope, it's tawakkul, it's inaba, it's all of these things. This is from the i'tiqad of the qalb. So therefore, it really comprises all of these different things together. So now we can see how the definition of At-Tahawi is limited from two angles, right? Because he said, إِقْرَارٌ بِاللِّسَانِ وَتَصْدِيقٌ بِالْجَنَانِ. He described it as speech of the tongue and the tasdeeq of the heart. And he didn't mention action. He didn't mention amal, the amal of the limbs. But at the same time, by saying tasdeequn bil janan and not i'tiqadun bil janan, we see there's another deficiency. What's that deficiency? is because it is the actions of the heart. They are implied as not being from Iman. Do you understand that? Yeah? There's two issues. There's two issues there. Okay, so this leads us to the final point that we can finish with is regarding the fact that the people will vary in Iman. So everything that we've discussed up until this point, it tells us and informs us that the people will vary naturally in their Iman. It will increase and decrease. We see that outwardly and apparently from their actions, from the degree and extent to which they perform the salah and give the zakah and perform the siyam and make the hajj and comply with Allah's commandments and keep away with the prohibitions. All of these things indicate that Iman increases and it decreases. And even in the actions of the heart, we speak of the actions of the limbs, and we say that there are some things which are wajib from the actions of the limbs. Like, for example, the salah is wajib, the zakah is wajib. These are things which are obligatory in terms of the actions of the limbs. There are also actions which are obligatory, which are from the actions of the heart. Right? So, for example, there are certain actions which are wajib to be performed by the heart, and there are certain actions which are wajib to be abandoned by the heart. So, for example, loving Allah is wajib in the heart. Having tawakkul upon Allah is wajib in the heart. Fearing Him. All of these are from the actions of the heart which are commanded, which are wajib. And similarly, there are actions of the heart which are haram, they are prohibited. Like, for example, arrogance, having kibr. And su'ul dhan billah. Having an evil assumption or presumption about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, tazkiyatun nafs, like purifying oneself. These are certain actions which are actions of the heart, which are haram, which are prohibited. So, what does this tell us? It tells us that when we speak of the actions of the heart, there is the tasdeeq of the heart, right? There's the tasdeeq which is obviously at the beginning, but then there are other actions which are wajib that follow on from that. The love of Allah, the ikhlas to Allah, the tawakkul upon Allah, right? So these are the actions which are wajib. And likewise, there are certain actions which are haram, like kibr and so on and so forth. So the point being here is that when we look at the heart, it isn't just tasdeeq by itself, as implied by Imam al-Tahawi. There are numerous other things that also are in relation to the heart, from things which are wajib and things which are unlawful for the heart to have. And all of this is a connected reality. It's all connected together. You can't separate these affairs. So, therefore, we believe in the increase and the decrease in Iman, and we also believe that the outward actions affect what is inside the heart. So when you perform the salah, it actually affects the tasdeeq in your heart and the i'tiqad in your heart. Right? We believe that. And the example that we can give, it's actually an example that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentions as a parable for Iman, is just like we have a plant. We have a plant. The plant, just like it is affected by the water and the nutrients in the soil, right? So internally, from that which we don't see, the part of the plant that we don't see under the soil, the roots, it's affected by the water and the nutrients, right? Right. So there are things which it uptakes and it affects the plant. Then likewise, above the surface, there is the air and the sunshine, which affects the leaves. But they in turn also affect the roots. Just like the roots also affect the stem and the upper part of the plant. So the outward part of the plant affects the bottom part of the plant. And the inward part of the plant affects the outward part of the plant. It works both ways. So when we have the outward actions of Iman, they actually affect what's in your heart. And what is in your heart of the Iman, of the tasdeeq, knowledge, affairs and actions, and these actions are performed, that in turn affects the outward part of the Iman as well. So the Shaykh says that this is something that a person, he knows from his own experience, he can feel it, that when, for example, he performs the outward deeds, he feels an increase in his iman inwardly. He gives some sadaqah, he performs some nawafil, he feels the increase in his iman inwardly. And likewise, when he feels that tasdeeq has increased in his heart, he reads something, he reads an ayah, he reads a hadith, he reads an athar, it affects, he believes in it, it affects his heart, it brings about the various actions of the heart, and outwardly it leads to action. So it works both ways in this way, and this is the reality of iman, right? This view is something that cannot be held if you have a view of iman like the view of the murji'ah in the various opinions and statements that they have, right? So that's something that shows you the difference and the correctness and the comprehensiveness of the view of Ahlul Sunnah as it relates to the topic of iman. That brings us to an end of the discussion of that section, and inshallah ta'ala we'll discuss the following statement of Imam at-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala in the next lesson. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.